Okay, so we can carry on. And that's unfortunate because that's what samsara is all about, carrying on, carrying on, carrying on. But we shall, hopefully this carrying on will be conducive to non-carrying on, so we'll see what happens there. So now we have had a look so far at some of these things discussed by the Buddha before his awakening. We look at old age, rebirth, sickness and death, and now we're going to look at the last few factors here. So maybe I will go a little bit faster because otherwise we'll never get through these suttas, which we don't have to get through them, but anyway, see what happens. So the next one is about sorrow. And what should be described as liable to sorrow? Partners and children, male and female, bondservants, goats and sheep, chickens and pigs, elephants and cattle are liable to sorrow. These attachments are liable to sorrow. Someone who is tied, infatuated, and attached to such things, themselves liable to sorrow, seeks what is also liable to sorrow. So sorrow is, the Pali word is soka, I think. Yes, it is. And it means basically exactly what sorrow means in English. A very similar kind of word. And it's just the ordinary tragedies of life, people dying, people getting sick, losing your, whatever it is that you're attached to and holding on to. This is really what this refers to. And this is life. Yeah, the people, we are subject to these things ourselves, and then the people around us also become sad and sorrow, and then we sorrowful, and then the whole thing just is not so interesting, right? Because of all of these negative emotions that are part of our existence. I don't think I need to say too much more about that. Then we go on to the last one, which I've already mentioned in a bit of detail. What should be described as liable to corruption? Partners and children, male and female, slaves, goats and sheep, chickens and pigs, elephants and cattle, gold and money are liable to corruption. These attachments are liable to corruption. Someone who is tied, infatuated, and attached to such things, themselves liable to corruption, seeks what is also liable to corruption. This is the ignoble search. So that is the ignoble search for you. Again, I discussed the idea of corruptions before, so I'm just going to leave it for now and move on to the next part of the sutta. And now we come to the noble search. And what is the noble search? It is when someone who is themselves liable to be reborn understands the drawbacks in being liable to be reborn, seeks the unborn supreme sanctuary extinguishment. So this is now, we are moving in a different direction. Instead of multiplying the problem, instead of making the problem worse, we're seeking a solution to the problem. So you understand that the idea of rebirth is problematic, and now you look for finding a way out of rebirth, finding a way out of all of these issues that we've just been talking about. And so this is kind of the remarkable quality again of the Buddha, that he actually is seeking a solution to things that don't normally seem to have a solution. Sickness and all of these kind of things. So you will notice here that the first thing is understanding the drawbacks of rebirth, then understanding the drawbacks of all of these things. And this is where the idea of right view comes in. Understanding that these things are inherently problematic. And this is where the idea of rebirth becomes incredibly important, because arguably, if there only is one death, only one old age, only one sickness, or sickness within one life, if you like, if that is all there is, arguably there is no real problem, because you die, that is the end of everything, and there is no real issue. This problem really becomes problematic only in the light of rebirth. If there is rebirth, that is when you have, as I mentioned before, re-old age, re-death, re-sorrow, re-corruption. Everything becomes re. then it becomes re, then it becomes re, etc., right? It goes on like this. So this is kind of like why it becomes really problematic. So understanding the drawback, this is a very important part of this. And this actually is what requires contemplation to really allow these realities to sink in until it starts to have an emotional effect on you. The most important thing is for things to have an emotional effect on you. When you feel these things viscerally, like something that actually becomes a driving force in your life to make you move, in a sense. That is what we're looking for. The noble path, everything in the world, really, we are driven by emotions. We're not really driven by intellectual ideas. And so becoming like a pipe-smoking gentleman or gentlewoman, smoking the pipe and kind of reflecting on dependent origination. Avijja, paccaya, sankhara. Very interesting. That is not what the path is about. The path is about giving rise to something that drives you on the path. And emotions are what drives us. And this is one of those beautiful things about dependent origination. Dependent origination, we have Vedana paccaya tanha from the condition of feeling. Feelings are really, they are kind of proto-emotions. Feelings are good, bad, neutral. And this is basically what drives us in this world. It's like emotions in a sense. Because these feelings, they then give rise to craving. And craving is what makes us move, right? This is what drives us. And this is true also on the Buddhist path. Why are we Buddhist? Because we crave for happiness in a very deep way. And maybe we have found a very positive way of dealing with that, because Buddhism is obviously a real way of dealing with the problem of suffering. But we need those feelings, we need those emotions to enable us to actually move forward on the path. And so it's very, very significant. Dependent origination is really about that. So feelings are really important. And this is why feelings are such an interesting part of the idea of dependent origination. Feelings are important precisely because they are the driving thing in our existence. This is what gives life meaning, in a sense. Without feelings, life will have no meaning. It is a positive and negative aspect of feeling which actually gives life a sense of purpose. That feeling, there would be nothing to be done. If there was no feeling in respect to the things in the world, we would have no motivating factors anymore. Feelings are what makes life meaningful. And this is then also what drives us on the spiritual path. So giving rise to these emotions is incredibly important for the path to work. And so you need to make it felt. So you understand the drawbacks. And then because you understand the drawback, then you seek the opposite of the born. Instead of the born, we seek the freedom from the born. The opposite here is the ajata. Before we're talking about jata, which is the born, here is the ajata. It is here translated by Bhante Sujata as unborn, but this needs to be understood in the sense of freedom from birth. Unborn, it sounds like some kind of state which is unborn, which is a little bit unfortunate. But really what it means is the freedom from birth. And this is then true for each one of the following ones. Freedom from birth, freedom from old age, freedom from death, etc., etc. So we're seeking the freedom from these things. So this is kind of a very, I think, important point here. That when we talk about what we are looking for is a liberation, freedom from these negative qualities. We're not looking for some kind of unborn reality, but we're looking for the freedom of from these kind of particular problems. And this is then the supreme sanctuary. This is the Anuttara Yoga Kema in Pali. Yoga is can be also considered the liberation of freedom from exertion. Don't have to exert yourself anymore. Or a sanctuary here is an alternative interpretation of this particular thing. So the freedom from exertion. No more exertion in the world. You can finally relax because you let go of all of these kind of problems. This is what we are seeking for ultimately on this path. Extinguishment. Extinguishment is a translation of the word nibbana. this Nibbana that we have there. I don't know if you can see the Pali there on the right-hand side. And it is appropriate to translate Nibbana as extinguishment. This is a very, I think, interesting and important point about the suttas, how to render the suttas, how to understand the suttas, is that when we translate the Pali, and it's kind of interesting to consider these things a little bit. The idea, as I mentioned before, is the idea to render, to give the English in such a way that we give the same information that the Buddha gave to the ancient Indians 2,500 years ago. And so what did the ancient Indians, what did they hear when they heard the word Nibbana? And what they heard was not just a word without meaning, because the word Nibbana had a very clear meaning in that time. And the meaning is the idea of the fire going out. It means something being extinguished. And so if we want to give that same meaning to people in the present day, we have to render these things as extinguishment rather than just leave it as Nibbana. Very often you hear this idea that when you translate the Buddhist text, certain words should not be translated. Like Nibbana, too profound, don't translate it. Actually, I don't think that is the right approach. Because if you don't translate it, what happens is that people start reading whatever they want into those terms. Nibbana becomes like this blanket term with which your favorite ideas get read into that term, and then we actually don't really understand what is going on. But if you render it as extinguishment, we have some idea what is happening here. So the Buddhist path is about extinguishment. Kind of nice, right? What are we extinguishing? Well, first and foremost, what we are extinguishing is all the negative qualities, the ill will, the desires, all of these things that actually make us hot and bothered and kind of leads to all kind of problems in life. We're extinguishing delusion. That is kind of nice because delusion is really problematic for obvious reasons. So this is the main thing that we are extinguishing, these fires, the fires that burn the mind, burn the body. We are burned by these things. We're not really peaceful. We're not cool. We're not Siti Bhutto. Siti Bhutto is one of the epithets of the Arahant in the suttas. Siti means cool. Bhutto means become cool. So Siti Bhutto means like the cool one, the one with Ray-Ban sunglasses. It's a nice word. I've been trying for a long time to get one of the monks at the monastery to take the name Siti Bhutto, because I think it's a really cool name. Literally a cool name, And kind of, because it means, so if someone asks you, what is your name? Oh, I'm the cool one. That's my name. It's kind of nice, right? It has a nice double meaning, which is interesting, So this is the idea of being extinguished, being cool, no more hot embers, no longer being burned inside by all of this silliness of ours. And so you seek the unborn, and you seek the themselves liable to grow older. And so you seek the freedom from old age. He has the unaging here. I don't think the unaging really brings it out very well. It is a freedom or liberation from old age. That's really what it means. So you seek the liberation from old age, extinguishment. You seek the liberation from illness, unailing. I don't know, unailing, all right. Freedom from illness, I think, is clearer. Undying, I would prefer freedom from death, freedom from sorrow, freedom from corruption. Supreme sanctuary, extinguishment. This is the noble search. So this is the noble search, And then comes the interesting part. Now comes the Buddha again, and now he's talking about his own striving before his awakening. And he says, mendicants, before my awakening, when I was still unawakened but intent on awakening, I too, being liable to rebirth, sought what is liable to be reborn. So this is the Buddha talking about himself when he was still what was he exactly? That's a good question. What was he before he was the Buddha? He was the Buddha to be. Was he a bodhisattva? This is what it says here. If you look at the Pali on the other side, it actually says bodhisattva, bodhisattva, it says over there. Can you see that? The word? Have you got the Pali as well, or is it just me? Yeah, everyone's got the Pali. Cool. Okay, good. So, bodhisattva. So what is this word bodhisattva? So you will notice here, there's no bodhisattva in the English. So what is Bhante Sujato doing? We should all write letters to him and complain, right? Bodhisattva has disappeared. He's really going to get upset with me now because I'm saying these kind of things. But actually, no, the answer is that he's got it spot on. What he's saying is really interesting, because the word bodhisattva, or bodhisattva in the Sanskrit version of the word, is really a later development in Buddhism that happened after the Buddha passed away. And you know, when someone passes away who is so important, in the world, someone like the Buddha, imagine that you are part of the Buddhist community, right? And at the time the Buddha is still alive, you can see the Buddha is about to pass away. Everyone is looking to the Buddha to reply to the most minute problems in the Sangha. And one of the things that is very obvious when you start to read things like the Vinaya Pitaka, which is the one that I have translated from the Pali, is I feel so sorry for the Buddha. The tiniest little thing, and they go to the Buddha, Master, please help us. How long can your fingernails be before you have to cut them? What? He's the greatest spiritual genius in human history, and you ask him about your blooming fingernails? What's wrong with you? Ask someone else about your fingernails, for goodness sake. And all of these little things that the Buddha has to sort out, I feel this is terrible, right? If someone asked me about it, I would ask them too. No, I wouldn't ask them too. So, but it's like, it's almost like heart kind of rendering, right? Kind of seeing the Buddha have to reply to all of these things. He should be talking about dependent origination or nibbana, or about something important, not the fingernails. That's what he has to reply to. And so this is, you can imagine, when you have someone like that who is so central, everything you want to find out, if you're a lay person or monastic, you go to the Buddha, please, Venerable Sir, help us. We have a desperate problem about fingernails. Help us sort it out. And then that person dies. Because this is the nature of existence. Everyone has to die. The Buddha dies too. Imagine the whole. Imagine the emptiness in existence when someone like that passes away. It is really traumatizing for the whole Buddhist community. I'm terrified of Ajahn Brahm dying. That's kind of, for me, the greatest. When Ajahn Brahm dies, bad consequences. It's going to be difficult, right? Because someone like that who is very important in the world, how many great monastics are there in the world? How many great monastics are there in Australia? I don't know. It's hard. I'm not going to say anything about it. I'm not going to answer that in detail. It's up to you to decide. But Ajahn Brahm, when Ajahn Brahm dies, it's going to leave a big hole in the monastic community. Because he's a very influential figure. He's the one who holds Bodhinyana Monastery together. As soon as he's gone, the monks are going to disappear to the four directions, and this large monastery is going to be empty. Actually, that's a good idea. The monastery is going to be empty. I can stay by myself in the monastery. And yay! Maybe it's a good thing as I'm Brahm dying. That's a new idea. I never thought about this before. So, unintended consequences. Okay, but my point is that when someone who is very influential and very core to the community dies, it leaves a gaping hole in the community. And that gaping hole then gets filled with what? It gets filled with, who was this person? Now is the time to build the museum of Ajahn Brahm. And as soon as the Ajahn Brahm Museum will arise. Ajahn Brahm's teacher, Ajahn Shah, he said, when I die, no museum. The first thing I do after he's dead, build a museum for Ajahn Shah. Now you go to Thailand, there's an Ajahn Shah museum. What does it have in there? It has Ajahn Shah's ball, his robe. Not very interesting. Anyway, that's when it was there. That's all that's left. We cling on to the memories. We cling on to the past. Instead of moving on and finding inspiration somewhere else, we cling on to the past. And the same thing happened to the Buddhist community when the Buddha passed away. And this is where the origin of the Buddha mythology, the Buddha legend, starts to rise from this kind of situation. And so they asked, who was the Buddha? Yeah, okay, we have these few suttas where he says that he went forth and his parents cried when he went forth. And we'll see that in a second. But actually, who was he really? Where did he really come from? How was he able to become the Buddha? What did he do in his past lives to become the Buddha? He was a bodhisattva in his past lives. He practiced for 4 incalculable eons. He took a vow under the Buddha Dipankara. He was the ascetic Sumedha. He bowed down to the Dipankara. I make a vow to become a Buddha of the future. Didn't he say that? Yeah, I think he said that actually. I have a vague memory of the Buddha saying something like that. Let's write it down. And then you get this Buddha mythology gradually arising, and the mythology of the Bodhisattva starts to arise. But in the suttas, in the word of the Buddha, there is no Bodhisattva path. There is no Bodhisattva. What there is only this kind of situation you find here. The word Bodhisattva is mentioned without really any content. Then you realize that actually the word Bodhisattva can have different meanings. And one of the meanings is it can mean the one who is intent on awakening. Yeah, that is one of the meanings. And to me, that makes far better sense than the idea of awakening being. Yeah, Bodhisattva, sattva is being. Awakening being is kind of a strange word anyway. Awakening, what is that supposed to mean anyway? Awakening being. Intent on awakening actually makes really good sense. And this is, of course, exactly fits the context perfectly. Yeah, the Buddha leaves his home life. From the moment he leaves his home life until he actually reaches awakening, he is a being intent on awakening, intent on finding a solution to the problems of old age, sickness, and death. Intent, that is what awakening is all about. So I find that a far more plausible translation of the word bodhisattva than this idea of awakening being. What we are doing, we're taking the later mythology and we're reading that into the suttas. And this is one of the greatest dangers in Buddhism, is because we have so much material coming from after the time of the Buddha. We know that material, and because we know that material, when we read the suttas with that material in mind, and we think the suttas are saying that. But no, you have to remember, the suttas existed before that material even existed. So when you are reading the suttas, you're reading them with a biased mind, and you think the word bodhisattva means what it means right there in the suttas, when actually it probably means something completely different. This is a big problem. Yeah, this happens if you read the Abhidhamma. You read the Abhidhamma, then you read the suttas. You read the suttas in a new way. You now read it through the filter of the Abhidhamma. You read the Visuddhimagga. Visuddhimagga, one of the most influential books in all of Theravada Buddhism. So you read the Visuddhimagga, then you read the suttas. You read it through the filter of the Visuddhimagga. You read the Buddha mythology is found in the Jataka Nidana. Jataka Nidana is the origin story to the Jatakas. It has this long Buddha mythology. You know about the story. The Buddha kind of seeing his wife and son asleep, and he gets on the horse Kantaka and he rides off into the not in the sunset, but jumps over the wall to this magnificent city called Kapilavatthu that had millions of inhabitants. And it's all just mythology, but then when you read the suttas, you read it through that lens, forgetting that this is invented later on, and then you read the suttas with a biased mind. So one of the most difficult things for us to do is actually to read the suttas on their own terms and to see what is in the suttas without being biased by the later tradition. In fact, it is impossible to do that completely, but we should be aware of our own bias because we're all biased in certain ways. So when you get the secular Buddhists, they will read the suttas through the secular bias. They will say, actually, rebirth is nonsense. We all know that. And they will read the suttas through that bias. And they will say birth means, the mind kind of whatever, going through changes or whatever. So it's good to be aware of our biases, because when we are aware of our biases, we can counteract them to some extent. And this is one of the things we need to do here. So actually, I'm really happy with Bhante Sujato. It's terrible. I always say when I disagree. I should also say when I really agree with him. This is certainly the case when usually he's really spot on. Yeah, he's actually quite a brilliant person in many ways. And this is certainly certainly right in this particular case. So intent on awakening is a great translation here. Can you follow all my rantings and ravings about various things? Yeah? Okay, good. I'm glad. So if you can't follow what I'm saying, it's probably okay. Probably not that important anyway, so don't worry too much. It's terrible. All so much talking, and maybe it doesn't matter. That's kind of a sad thing to have to say, but gee, okay. Anyway, so then the Buddha says, yeah, myself being liable to grow older. You seek what is not liable to grow older, right? Where are we now? So what's happening now? Okay, yeah. So the Buddha, sorry. I too being liable to sort what is liable to be reborn. And then all of these other things are sort what is liable to grow old, to fall sick, to die, to sorrow, to become corrupted. And I also sort these things. This is what I mentioned before. Even the Buddha to be, he is very much like us. Yeah, he's seeking all of these things that actually have the same problem. And again, it kind of makes you feel, well, if this is what the Buddha did, no wonder we are doing it. Yeah, the Buddha to be made this mistake. Of course we are making this mistake. But let us learn from the Buddha. Let us learn from what he did and take this on board in a very deep way and see if we can actually not fall into the same trap and actually kind of move out of it. So again, it humanizes the Buddha when we see this. Yeah, it makes him into a human being. And this, I think, is a very positive kind of adjustment of our perception that is very, very powerful and useful for our practice. And then the Buddha says, then it occurred to me, why do I, being liable to be reborn, to grow old, to fall sick, not to grow old, to become old, to fall sick, to sorrow, to die, to become corrupted, why do I seek the things of the same nature? Yeah, this is the question that we should also ask ourselves. Why am I seeking all of these things when I already have this problem? Why don't I seek the unborn, the freedom from the born, the freedom from old age, the freedom from illness, the freedom from dying, the freedom from sorrow, the freedom from corruption, the supreme sanctuary, extinguishment? This is what the Buddha is seeking. Yeah. So now he realized there is an issue to be had here. Why don't I find the solution to these things? And this is kind of, again, what makes the Buddha to be so special, is that he has this kind of audacity to think what no one else thinks, and to go beyond what normally seems possible in this world, trying to find a solution to the impossible problems of life. And then comes another interesting little bit here. When the Buddha says, sometime later, was still black-haired, blessed with youth, in the prime of life, though my mother and father wished otherwise, weeping with tearful faces, I shaved off my hair and beard, dressed in ochre robes, and went forth from lay life to homelessness. And so here we see the Buddha to be, he is still young, blessed with youth, and this shows us that the ideal time to go forth is when you are young, when you have lots of energy and you have the ability to apply yourself to the monastic life fully. That's the kind of the ideal time to go forth. And then we have this little paragraph or little sentence about, though my mother and father wished otherwise, weeping with tearful faces. And that's kind of interesting. It is interesting because the normal Buddha mythology that we hear all the time is that the Buddha just disappeared in the middle of the night. And it sounds like the Buddha didn't have any sense of responsibility, right? He just kind of goes off while his wife and son are sleeping and kind of goodbye. And because we are Buddhists, we are kind of willing to forgive the Buddha for that. Okay, we are kind of seeking something really amazing, so it's okay. But actually, it's a bit weird, isn't it? It doesn't really sound right. just going off, and shouldn't you at least tell your wife that, okay, are you able to look after my son? And of course she is, because she has the larger family and all of these things. And I was told that there are missionaries kind of going around, like Christian missionaries, when they go off into places in the Buddhist world, maybe people are not very well educated, and say, well, actually, your Buddha is irresponsible. Look what he's doing. He's riding off in the middle of the night. Yeah. And he's kind of leaving his wife and son to fend for themselves. What kind of bad teacher have you got? Our God, Christian God, much better than your Buddha, become Christians. And they say, oh, yeah, maybe you have a point. Yeah, okay, the Buddha, not as good as I thought. Okay, we become Christians. But actually, it's a stupid reason to become a Christian anyway, but there are many things with Christianity that don't make much sense, in my opinion. I don't know why anybody would want to become a Christian, but it isn't even true, right? And this is actually the real story. The real story is that the Buddha he had obviously a conversation with his parents. He told them that he was going to go forth, and they were crying as a consequence. You can imagine if you have a son like the Buddha someone really extraordinary with incredible capabilities, and that person decides to go forth, you can imagine how difficult that is. But he had the conversations. He obviously made sure that his wife and his son were taken care of. Yeah, that's obviously part of the conversation. So actually the whole story is just mythology. And that is why we have to be so careful with believing so much of the later mythology, which very often is completely misguided. It's been made up by people with a lot of faith, but not so much common sense, unfortunately. And that is the problem. Also, the idea that Kapilavatthu was a vast city with millions of inhabitants is complete nonsense. If you travel to the north of India and you look at some of the archaeological sites, they were like tiny little places. Small little towns. There weren't millions of inhabitants. Maybe there was a few thousand. That was kind of the maximum. Even the great cities at that time, like Savatthi and Rajagaha and Champa and Varanasi, maybe had a few tens of thousands of people at the maximum. They were quite small places. It was quite humble in those days. And a lot of the things that we hear are later exaggerations. So that is the noble search. And this is kind of how it is expressed in this particular sutta. And that is what makes the Buddha go forth. These are the contemplations. And this is in a very important part of the aspect of right view. And sometimes I think we make the Dhamma too complicated. We think too much about dependent origination. We try to understand dependent origination and we don't get anywhere on the path. Or we meditate to investigate mind moments or kalapas or what have you on this path. And we miss the easy things, the low-hanging fruits, the things that we all can do. And those things are actually really powerful things, These are the things that created the Buddha. Simple things, contemplation of the ordinary things of life. That is what we should be doing, and this is what we are missing out on. I'm not saying that we should never contemplate dependent origination. Yes, sometimes we shall, but we should focus on the easy things on the path, The ideas of right view, the things that actually make the path work properly. And what is interesting, of course, is that when the suttas talk about things like rebirth being a right view, the ideas of karma being right view, and all of these kind of things, we need to investigate the implications of these things. And this is what we are seeing here. These are the implications of the ideas like rebirth, of karma, of the existence of a Buddha in the world. Things that actions have results and fruits, that there is giving, there is mother and father and all of these kind of things. This is really what this is about. This is the simple ideas of right view. Make the path simple, and then you are a really wise person. Those people who make it too complicated, usually they actually only get lost in all the complications. That is kind of I think one of the very important things to take away from this. And I'm really surprised, by the wise people in the world. The people that I consider the wisest people in the world are often very simple people. They're people who live very simple lives. Yeah, I look like someone like Ajahn Brahmali. Ajahn Brahmali is a very simple person. Yeah, if you go to his cave, there's nothing much in his cave at all. There's just, he kind of goes in there, he disappears. When you see Ajahn Brahmali in the monastery here, he just sits there on his chair. Yeah, the monks are around. Often he doesn't say anything. He just sits there, and if you ask him a question, maybe he will answer, maybe not. If he's in a good mood, or he's usually in a good mood. If he has enough energy, he will answer. If not, he will say, oh yeah, maybe some other time, or he will just dismiss you with a joke or something like that, and that's okay. Yeah. But he's a very simple person. A very kind of simple character. I remember one of my favorite stories that Ajahn Brahmali used to tell, and which is found in one of his books. And that was when Ajahn Brahmali was after his 5th rains. Very often it's common, especially for monks in Thailand, after the 5th rains as a monk, 5th year as a monk, they will go traveling around the country. And Ajahn Brahmali went traveling around Thailand to visit some of the great monks in the northeast of Thailand. The northeast of Thailand is the most boring place imaginable on the planet. There's nothing there. It is flat. It is full of tapioca fields. Yeah, tapioca is like this bland vegetables that is, really boring. There's no forest. There's no hills. There's just a villager growing rice and tapioca. It's the most boring place in the world. And they have some of the best monks in the world. That's kind of interesting, right? The most boring places have the best monks. So boring is good sometimes. So he would travel around the northeast of Thailand to visit some of these great monks. And one of these great monks who is dead now was a monk called Ajahn Tate. And so he went to visit Ajahn Tate, and Ajahn Tate was already very famous in those days. And he had, because he was so famous, he had been given this big hall by the king of Thailand called the Mandapa. And I don't know if you have seen Thai architecture, very beautiful Buddhist architecture in Thailand, right? Beautiful halls, often quite ornate, especially if they're made by the king of Thailand. And very, very attractive. Yeah, Buddhist monasteries often get to become very beautiful. I'm not sure if that is a good or bad thing, but anyway, that's a discussion for another time. So Ajahn Brahmali goes to this monastery to visit Ajahn Tate, and he has all these questions in his mind. I'm going to ask Ajahn Tate about this. Yeah. Sankhara Pacha Vijnana, from Sankhara, from kind of willed activities comes consciousness. It's like dependent origination. What does this mean? Yeah, actually, I'm just making it up. I have no idea what he was going to ask him about. But you come with all these kind of fancy questions to ask the great master. And so it comes to the monastery. And he looks around, where could Ajahn Tate be? And so he goes to this mandapa, this large hall built by the king of Thailand. Maybe Ajahn Tate is in the big hall, yeah? So he goes and he kind of opens the door and he goes into the hall. And he looks around. Oh, no one here. And he closes the door. Wait a minute. What was that in the corner over there? And so he opens the door again and looks in. And he sees this old man in the corner over there. He didn't even see him the first time. Why didn't he see him? And this is kind of one of those amazing things about people who are really developed on the Buddhist path, right? Is that they kind of disappear. Someone who is really developed, someone who has given up a large part of the sense of self, it's like they don't shouting out anymore, here I am. What the ego does is kind of, here I am, notice me. That's what the ego wants to do, right? Please the whole world, you're kind of shouting out for attention. That is kind of what the ego is about. But when you give up the ego, there is no desire anymore to stand out. And because there's no desire to stand out, actually the desire is more like to fade away. That's what the kind of the arahant is about. And because of that, they kind of fade into the woodwork. Yeah, you don't see them anymore. They're sitting in the corner like nothing. So you don't see the arahants. So the wisest people in the room are the ones who are the most peaceful, which means I'm the least wise person in this room because I'm talking too much. This is interesting, right? The really wise people, they kind of fade away. They're not kind of shouting out, here I am, look at me, because there is no self anymore. And so then Ajahn Brahmali realized there's something really impressive about this person. I didn't even see he was there when I first came into the hall. And so then he enters and he starts to understand some of the profundity, what it means to be really spiritually advanced. And then he goes up to Ajahn Tate And because this person is so peaceful, because this person has no sense of self, as he enters the room, Ajahn Brahm becomes, of course, at that time, he's not Ajahn Brahm yet, but he's just Brahm or whatever. But he goes into that room and he becomes really peaceful. And he goes up to Ajahn Tate and then he bows down. There's something very beautiful about bowing down to someone who has a very profound spiritual practice. It is very powerful because when you bow down to something like that or somebody like that, you're not bowing down to an ego. What is painful is to bow down to someone who has an ego, because when you bow down to an ego, you may be taken advantage of, because that's what egos do. Yeah, they're bowing down to me. I'm important. That's what egos do. But when you bow down to someone who is maybe an arahant, someone who's gone a long way on the path, what you're bowing down to is something very beautiful. You're bowing down to wisdom. They don't care if you're bowing down to them. Not that they have no vested interest in that. They know that if you are bowing down, they know it's a good thing. Yeah, because they too bow down to the Buddha or whatever. It's a beautiful thing to bow down, because when you bow down to qualities, not to a person like that, you are actually, that very act of bowing down is itself a development of those qualities, because you are respecting those qualities through the act of bowing down. So bowing down is a very beautiful thing when you do it in the right way. Yeah, so bowing down to the Buddha, when you bow down to a Buddha statue, bowing down to someone like Ajahn Brahm, I enjoy bowing down to Ajahn Brahm because there's no sense of self really with Ajahn Brahm. Yeah, it's whatever. Yeah, it's very nice, a beautiful thing to do. And so Ajahn Brahm bows down to this Ajahn Tate. Yeah, it is a beautiful act to do that when you do it in the right way. Sometimes we hear these amazing stories, and this is a story of this monk who I know, and in his dream, he was bowing down to another monk, and the act of bowing down was so blissful that he got the nimitta, the bright light, in his mind while dreaming. Bang! He woke up straight away because the bliss is so powerful. Straight into jhana straight away. Yeah, this is the dream of bowing down to somebody. Yeah, this is the power of these things. So then he goes in and he bows down to Ajahn Tate. And of course, by this time, he's become so peaceful. And Ajahn Tate says to him, well, why have you come? And of course, because he's so peaceful, all the questions have already disappeared. Yeah. And he Ajahn Brahm says, I felt a bit foolish because I didn't really know anymore why I had come. Yeah? There was no questions anymore. I would have sat sitting down. But of course, there's no need to feel foolish if you are in the presence of an arahant. Arahant isn't going to judge you. This is the beautiful thing with being with somebody who's really practicing well. There's no judgment. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you think. They will never judge you. It's a beautiful feeling not to be judged by anyone, being accepted for who you are, with your flaws, with your good sides. You are okay. You are human. Of course you have flaws. It's okay. So you just sit down and you relax, and you can really relax in the presence of people like that. Why? Because they have so much metta. They have so much kindness. And this is the idea. Yeah, this is kind of that story of Ajahn Brahm visiting this monk. And then, of course, afterwards, he bows down again and he leaves. And he takes with him a memory, far more important to have that memory of meeting someone like that in the right way than it is to actually be able to ask the right questions. That memory stays with you for the rest of your life because it's so profound. And I don't know if you have ever had that feeling of meeting with people who are profound like that. Yeah, you meet with them, you can feel the kindness. I have certainly met people like that in my life, people who I have very little doubt that can read my mind. I'll tell you a story. This is kind of, I'm not sure where I'm going anywhere now. I've kind of lost completely the plot of idea what is happening. I'm just going to say some random things to kind of round this off. Please forgive me for that, but that's the way it goes. And I had this was with one of these great monastics, a great monk. And I was sitting with this great monk, and this monk knew that I was a disciple of Ajahn Brahm. He's very, very friendly with Ajahn Brahm, so he kind of plonked me on this big seat, next to himself. And I was sitting next to this great monk, and I was feeling a bit, oh, this great monk, what should I do? And so I was sitting there, and I was listening to him, and he was kind of talking to the lay people. Actually, Venerable Karunika was there as well at the time. And so I was sitting there next, actually, and then very quickly feel really at ease, because monks like that, they have so much metta and so much kindness. And while I was sitting there, I was looking at this monk, and he's getting quite old. And when people get old, they kind of lose a bit of the luster. They become sometimes they become a bit ugly when they become old. So I was sitting there, and the thought occurred to me, actually, you're a bit ugly. It's not a good idea, right? You're sitting next to this great monk, and maybe he's reading your mind, you don't know what's going on. That was my first thought. You're a bit ugly, but actually, because of your spiritual qualities, despite the external appearance being a bit ugly, actually you shine. You are a very beautiful person, despite the external ugliness, Because of your spiritual qualities, you're beautiful anyway. This was my thought. And as soon as I had that thought, this was kind of really extraordinary. As soon as I had the thought, he turns to this lady, this old lady sitting on the other side from me. And he says to this old lady, he says, well, even though, you are old and ugly, you can still be beautiful by practicing all the spiritual qualities. And I thought, what? And that's kind of really scary. And so after this meeting, I go to the Upatak, the person who was a translator, and I said to him, is this what he normally says to people? Is this kind of and he said, I never heard him say this before, right? This is kind of really unique. And so this is kind of the thing that you have. But kind of the weird thing is that if you come to someone like that and you think that they're reading your mind, and I certainly think mind reading is possible, and after that I became more convinced than ever. But the weird thing is that you are at ease with it, because they have so much metta. They are so accepting of you. It doesn't matter what you think, You can think, I'm going to murder you, and they still have metta towards you. It doesn't matter what you think. And so you are at ease anyway. And this is kind of the beautiful thing about these people. And so this is kind of what we are. I don't know where I was going with all of this. It doesn't matter. It's kind of irrelevant. So this is some of the nice way of thinking about this Buddhist path. And this is some of the ideas of right view, understanding what the Buddha to be really is about. And eventually, the Buddha to be turning into the Buddha, turning into all of these marvelous qualities, and us still having this teacher in the present day, someone who we now have sometimes really corrupted the memory of the Buddha, made him into something that he never was in the first place. What the Buddha really is, he's this kind of human being perfected. His amazing qualities, the wisdom, the profundity of compassion, of kindness, of peace, all of these marvelous things. That is really what the Buddha is. And we should be a privilege to be able to bow down to something like that. It's a beautiful thing. And so that is kind of the right way of thinking about this. Anyway, I'm going to stop there for now because it is 4:30 and we're going to do some more questions and answers. So I'm going to ask Venerable Karunika to please come up again and we can share the last Q&A session. So please feel free to ask some more questions and we're going to take it from there. So please, Tina, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Venerable. Just let Ayya get seated, silly, because we have some questions. Okay. So first question, I think this relates to what Ajahn you were talking about in the morning. So, dear Ajahn, I was conditioned since a child to always search for a love that transcends our human condition. As love is considered a divinity union in some religions, does the search for love and to understand love an ignoble search? The love between the Buddha and Princess Yasodhara seems to make rebirth all worth it. I'm not making these things up. I'm just reading the question.
No. The thing is about, of course, love in the sense of metta is great. Yeah, of course, metta is a wonderful thing. Yeah. But any kind of attached love, and the Buddha is saying in this particular sutta that actually that was wrong. This is exactly what he's saying here. So whatever attachments that he had to Yashodhara or his wife or whoever that was before his awakening, he's actually saying right here, it was an ignoble search. This is kind of what he's telling us. And the reason why it is an ignoble search is precisely because of the attachment. It leads to suffering down the track. And so we need to try to have a love that actually goes beyond those kind of attachment. That is what metta is about. And if you want to really be able to love someone else, and if you want to give them good advice and you want to kind of do the right thing for them, it is far better to have metta than to have the attached kind of love. Whenever we have attachments, we have a vested interest. If you're attached to somebody, it means that what you're really looking for is your own happiness, right? If you have a child and your child misbehaves, the reason you get upset with your child is not because of love for your child, it's because you look bad in the presence of your child misbehaving. You have a vested interest in the behavior of your child. It's no longer love for your child, it's really love for yourself at the end of the day. And so if you have real metta, your child misbehaves, you shrug your shoulders. Misbehave is not really a big problem. It is, it's end of the day, it is a problem of the child. You correct the child because it is good for the child to be corrected, but you don't do it in a way which is, you show that vested interest. You do it purely out of love for the child. So pure love is far better, because pure love is when you can actually really give good advice to other people without your own invested interest coming into the question there. Anyway, would you like to say something? Because I think my mind is kind of drying out now, so good to pass it on there.
One of the things I wanted to say, this is something Ajahn Brahm says again, is like if you really love somebody in the right way, it is like you want them to be happy. So it's not about the happiness that you get out, and that is the attachment. So in a brief way to understand whether you really love somebody is, if it is your spouse, for example, if they leaves you and goes away with your best friend, you should be really happy. And if you're not, that's not real love in the sense, because if you really see, okay, they are much more happy with my best friend than with me, I'm happy for them. So just to give a little idea of what we normally say as love, it's a lot of greed from our side, a lot of desire from our side, and a lot of attachment like that. It's actually far from metta. Metta is the feeling of seeing good qualities in another person and wanting them to truly be happy and being able to allow them to be, give them space. So no attachment there, So it's nice to think like that. And that's all I want to add.
Thank you, Venerables. It's all yours, Ayya. Okay, the next one. This again refers to Ajahn Brahmali, your talk earlier this morning. So Ajahn, to think that I have been there before, as in had been a corrupt person, etc., really humbles you, enables us to have the helpful metta. But aren't there any consciousnesses that have had positive conditions until they attain Nibbana? Aren't there consciousnesses that have had positive conditions until they attain Nibbana?
I'm a bit unclear. Can you try to read it out again, Tina, please?
Well, I have to say I didn't quite get this whole question either, but so you were talking earlier, and I'm just going to interpret it. I think what they're saying is earlier when you were talking about how you said that you yourself have been there before in terms of corrupt person. And so is it possible that we would have these positive conditions in us until we attain Nibbana? So we're not just corrupt all the way, but rather there would be maybe some mixture of corrupt and not so corrupt.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to ensure that you have positive conditions all the way to Nibbana is to gain Nibbana now, in this life. That is the only way, really. If you're going to put off Nibbana to your next life, then basically that's already a problem, because you don't know what's going to happen in the next life. It's too uncertain. So if that is possible, but you have to do it now. That is kind of the answer, I think, to that question. But the idea that there is some kind of smooth progress to Nibbana, that is mythology. It is not really how reality works. Even in this life, I don't know, I look back on my own monastic life, it's like really up and down. Sometimes things are going well, then it goes down the drain for a while, then maybe picks up again. It's like this, and this is the way it is for almost everybody here. The idea that you have a smooth kind of path all the way is really not the reality of things. The world is up and down. But I think the main takeaway is always that it is so uncertain. It is so incredibly unreliable. If you don't do it now, you don't know when the opportunity will come back again. You don't know when you will have the chance to do these things again. It's really now or never almost. That's kind of what it is about. This is why the contemplation of death is so useful, because that is kind of what that drives home, with this idea of now and never, really. So I think this idea of a smooth kind of, moving towards Nibbana is more like, it's not really reality. That's not how reality works usually, in my opinion.
Thank you. And that's related to the next question. Again, another one about rebirth. Seems like that's a topic that's that's really fascinated a lot of the audiences. So dear Venerables, taking a view of devil's advocate about death and rebirth, when reborn, as in this life, we cannot recall a previous life. Similarly, when born in the next life, we would not recall a previous life. So why do we want to do merit to enhance the next life? Can't remember it anyway. What's the point?
Okay, let's say that you had a memory blackout tomorrow. Does that mean that you would do all kind of terrible things so you can create lots of suffering for yourself after the memory blackout? No, right? You still want to be happy. It doesn't make any sense that you kind of do all kind of bad things so that you will suffer enormously. The fact that you have a memory blackout doesn't change the fact that you want to be happy. It is still a continuation of yourself. You still have to experience that suffering, so it's not a good idea. And maybe you will remember your past life. That's the other thing. You just don't know. If you get reborn in a Deva realm, for example, you can sometimes remember your past life. So depends on where you get reborn. There's all of these kind of things into the equation that makes these things very, very uncertain. So the fact that you can't remember it doesn't mean that you want to allow any kind of suffering to arise. So I don't think that really works. Devil's advocate, nice try, but sorry, it didn't work.
Yeah, especially, correct me if I'm wrong, but lower realms, when you're born, you actually have a memory of what happened, and you know why you are suffering. It's quite clear, because at the process, if you read about near-death experiences, you have a recollection of what you have done, and you take yourself into those places, and that memory is there. So good or bad, and we are worried about the bad one especially. So that's there. But the other thing is also about merit. Even if you don't remember the other lives, the quality of this life, like Ajahn says, it's important, because when you do good, even if there is no rebirth, or if you don't remember it, still you have a very beautiful, nice mind now. So that's all the reason to do good.
Great, thank you. Great answers. So, Venerables, totally different topic now. Is rising and falling of abdomen a correct practice someone who doesn't feel breath in nostrils? I'm asking because I use that method. Then do I get to know whether the mindful practice currently is going in the correct way?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not very familiar with this as a formal practice. As I understand meditation, like if you want to do what we call as samatha, which is like keeping the mind still, making it still, it is called chittassa ekaggata. That means mind is one pointed on one thing. So it doesn't always have to be breath. It can be anything. There are so many other meditation techniques. So if this works for you, I don't see why not.
No, I agree, but I think I can still expand a little bit, because I think the question is about how to watch the breath, whether you're watching the breath through the abdomen or the nostrils. And I have always followed Ajahn Brahm's advice, and that is not to really locate the breath on the body, but just to know the breath. And so if you close your eyes, you know whether the breath is going in, you know the breath is going out, and you don't have to locate it anywhere on the body. The idea that you have to follow the nostrils is really from the commentaries. The commentary to the Anapanasati Sutta, it says that parimukkang satting upatapetra is what you find in the Anapanasati Sutta. It means having established mindfulness. Parimukkang. What does parimukkang mean? The commentary says it means nas-agga. Nas-agga is the tip of the nose. That's where that comes from. But the Buddha doesn't really say anything about the tip of the nose. He doesn't say anything about the stomach. Yeah, the Buddha just says, be aware of the breath. And so I reckon that the way Ajahn Brahm teaches it, and Ajahn Brahm is a very skilled meditator, so I tend to follow Ajahn Brahm's advice. Yeah, just be aware of the breath going in, breath going out. Yeah, but in the end, if following the abdomen, if that works for you, wonderful, follow the abdomen. If following the nostrils work for you, follow the nostrils. If whatever it works, right? If it makes you peaceful, it is great. That is really the critical thing. It's about becoming calm, just like Venerable Karunika was saying. And if you become peaceful, then it's great. That is really the ultimate decider for whether something works or not. What are the results?
You. This is for you, Ajahn Brahmali. What's the meaning of Brahmali? Thank you, Ajahn Loveheart.
I'm going to tell the joke version. He'll tell the real. We just say little Ajahn Brahm, because in German, I think Ali means like a little thing, right? So Brahm, Ali means the little Ajahn Brahm. That's a joke, okay? It's not the real thing.
Now, what it really means, this is the real meaning. So I remember I was talking on the phone to some sort of, I think maybe a builder or something in Perth. And he's asked me what my name was. My name is Brahmali. I said, what, Bob Marley? And I thought if Bob Marley was somehow resurrected, that's what he said. Anyway, this is kind of strange, because I had to choose a name. Yes, I was kind of looking, and Ajahn Brahm said, yeah, if you're going to choose a name for yourself, look through the Theragatha. Yeah, Theragatha is the verses of the ancient monks. And so I came to Brahmali. I thought, yeah, Brahmali, that's a little bit like I'm going to be a disciple of Ajahn Brahm. Okay, let me just take Brahmali, like the Brahm ally, maybe something like that. The ally of Brahm, I don't know what. And then it turns out later on, I actually discovered that Ali, which is the ending, is Brahma plus Ali, right? Or Brahm plus Ali. Ajahn Brahm's name is Brahma plus Vangso. Yeah, Brahma Vangso. It turns out that Ali and Vangso basically mean the same thing. Yeah, it means like lineage or line or kind of family or the member of some like a clan or something like that. So actually, my name is basically Brahma Vangso. Which is weird. I only discovered that like 10 or 15 years after I chose that name, right? It's weird. So it basically means the lineage of Brahma. So that's kind of the answer. It's kind of a very strange thing to discover here. Anyway, there you are.
That's great. Thank you. Dear Ajahn,
Actually, that's another thing. Before I was Brahmali, I was Sujato. Right? So before, and then someone said, oh yeah, you have to find a new name because there already is a Sujato, right? So you better find a new. So then I choose Ajahn Brahm instead. It's very strange, isn't it? Anyway, please fire away, Tina.
All part of the family, it seems. Dear Ajahn, may I inquire about your journey to becoming a monk? Could you please share more about how your parents reacted and how you managed to gain their agreement for a life in the monastery? Thank you so much, Ajahn.
Okay, I've been asked this question so many times that I decided at one point to give a talk about this once and for all, get it out of the way so no one would ever ask me again. It shows you how deluded you can be here. But there is a book, actually, which is called Why I Am a Buddhist Monk. That is available on the internet, and people actually enjoy that book quite a bit. It's a bit different from what you might think it is about. So check out, search for my name, and search for Why I'm a Buddhist Monk, and you can read it online to get the long version. But the short version is that I'm just going to answer to the part about my parents, whether they liked it or not. My parents were not amused. Yeah, when I decided to become a monk, they were not happy at all. You can imagine, yeah, my parents are from Norway. Yeah, we are far away from the Dhamma. There's no Dhamma in Norway. There's no Buddhist. There's no nothing. There's just snow and ice and kind of miserable weather and darkness. That's kind of Norway for you. And my parents, basically, if you have no idea about Buddhism, they were kind of worried I was kind of disappear into some kind of cult, yeah, or sect or something. That is what they were concerned about, because this is what you hear about in the world, people disappearing into these things. And of course, also in the kind of larger Buddhist community, of course, there are sometimes cults and sects appearing. So it's not entirely unreasonable to think that. So it took a while before my parents started to warm to the idea. One of the things that really helped, they came to Perth and they saw me in kind of my natural surroundings, like an animal in the zoo, and they saw me kind of there, like together with the kangaroos or whatever. And they saw me with all the other Buddhists, and then gradually it started to warm on them. Maybe he's doing something good, yeah. Maybe he's not wasting his life. One of the first things my father said to me when I became a monk, he said, "I did not bring you up to become a Buddhist monk." Thank you very much. But then gradually things started to change. Yeah? They started to see, actually, this is something really beautiful under the surface. There's something really powerful going on. And I remember I wrote this article for one of the newsletters that we have at the Buddhist site of WA. And I said in this newsletter, my parents, they accept that I'm a Buddhist monk, but I don't think they understand it. And then somehow my parents got to read this, right? That was very interesting, because that actually was when the change really started to happen, because they realized that if I say this to other people, that was kind of a bit embarrassing to them, yeah? They accept it but don't understand it. And from then on, things really started to change. And for me, this was a very interesting journey. And, initially when I started out, because my parents would never say no if I wanted to do something. So I was very stubborn, so I decided to become a Buddhist monk regardless. And of course, they give you the A-OK because of that. But then as you gradually live this life and you start to understand, actually, my job is not to proselytize and turn my parents into Buddhists. My job is really to live the Buddhist life properly. And then if my parents understand, because I live it well and I do the right thing, then that is the most greatest likelihood they will come with me, yeah, and start to understand some of the Buddhist ideas. And that's exactly what happened. I started to be kind to my parents. I said, what happened? What happened to that rebellious teenager? Yeah. And this really goes to your parents' hearts when you start to treat them in a good way. And this is kind of how gradually change started to happen. And after a while, after years and years of kind of going on in this way, there came a point, and this is kind of really kind of extraordinary. There came a point, my father said to me, and fathers never say these things to their sons, yeah, this never really happens, except it happened in this case. I'm not sure how it happened. My father said to me, you know what, I used to be your teacher, now you're my teacher. That was kind of, what? Did I hear correct? That's beautiful, yeah, when that happens, because it means that somehow you have actually been able to reach your parents' hearts in a very deep way, yeah, and it's a very kind of powerful thing, yeah, and it's a privilege, yeah, to be the son in a family and then having the ability to bring your parents along in this way. It's a really wonderful thing, yeah, And this is what happens in ideal circumstances. And not because I am a great monk or whatever, but it's simply because of the power of the Dhamma combined with having reasonable parents. Yeah, my parents are quite reasonable and open-minded and not too silly about things. That's kind of what happened in my life. And this is how kind of things gradually turned in a good way. And it's actually very nice. These days, my father actually passed away. Now my mother is still there, and she listens to my Dhamma talks. My brother listens to my Dhamma talks. Some of my friends from lay life sometimes listen to my Dhamma talks. It's kind of extraordinary. You start to realize the impact you have as a Buddhist monk. It's kind of really powerful, and it's very beautiful when these things happen. So if you live your life reasonably well, there will be some people who come around in this way. There will be some people who never come around regardless of what you do, and that's also okay. But this is kind of the result of this.
Okay, I had the really rare opportunity to speak to Ajahn Brahmali's mother. And I did ask this question myself to her. So this was Ajahn Brahmali's version, but this is what his mother told me. I asked, how did you feel when Ajahn Brahmali said he wanted to become a monk? And she said that it was close to Christmas time or something. They were at dinner and they got the phone call from him saying that he wanted to continue on. And the whole family, the whole table became dead silent. Nobody spoke for a little while precisely because they didn't understand what he was going to do. But the only bit that I want to really share was his mother said that even though she didn't understand why he was doing it, what it was about, what Buddhism was, all of that thing, she accepted it because she realized if that is what my son, if that is what is going to make my son happy, then I'm happy for him and I want to allow that. And I realized it's amazing because we know even in the Buddhist world, how many parents don't allow their children to become monks and nuns. They are okay with other people's children becoming monastics, but not mine, because they want to hold on to. But his mom, even without understanding even the power of the path, not knowing anything about this, even they're going to be far away, never going to see him for a long time, with all of that. So that I felt that was really pure metta on her side to really allow him to be. So in that case, it was not that kind of attached love she did have. So I was really inspired when I heard that. I just wanted to share that.
That's so heartwarming. And I think it's a really nice way to end today with such heartwarming stories. And also for those who've asked questions, thank you again for your questions. Excellent questions today. And for those who've asked questions and we haven't been able to answer them, please come back tomorrow, pop the questions into the chat or into this box, and then we can use that for tomorrow's session. So we're going to end today with a closing, a dedication of merits. So we'll invite the Venerables to lead that session for us. Thank you.
Okay, did you want to do the formal Pali? And the Pali sharing of merits? I'm asking Uncle Lalia. Okay, all right. Okay, so just to recollect, today was a really beautiful day. In your mind, we have taken precepts, either 5 precepts or 8 precepts to live by these beautiful teachings. Some of you have also given dana and offerings, and also meditated, listened to Dhamma. All of these things are amazing things to bring up joy, pure forms of joy. And it is that joy that we are going to share with ourselves, with all the beings around, with everybody here for their benefit. So we can recite the Pali Gathas together. First of all, we'll share merits with the Devas and then also with the departed relatives. Akasatta ca bhummatta devanaga mahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chiranrakkantu lokasasanam. Akasatta ca bhummatta devanaga mahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chiranrakkantu desanam. Akasatta ca bhummatta devanaga mahiddhika Punyantang anumoditva chiran rakkantu mam paranti ettavata cammehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya ettavata cammehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya ettavata cammehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya idam me ñātīnaṁ hotu sukhita hontu ñātayo idam me ñātīnaṁ hontu ñātayo idam me ñātīnaṁ hotu sukhita hontu ñātayo. Is it okay if I give a blessing chant, friend? Okay. Sabba buddhanubhavena sabba dhammanubhavena sabba sanghanubhavena Buddha ratanang dhamma ratanang sangha ratanang tinang ratananang nubhavena chaturasiti sahasra dhammakanda nubhavena pitakataya nubhavena jina savaka nubhavena sabete roga sabete bhaya sabete antaraya sabete upadava sabete dunnimitta sabete avamangala vinasantu Ayuvadako, Dhanavadako, Sirivadako, Yasavadako, Balavadako, Vannavadako, Sukhavadako, Hotu Sabbada, Dukharoga Bhayavena, Soka Satu Chupadava, Aneka Antarayapi, Vinasantu ca tejasa jayasiti dhanang labang soti bhagyang sukang balang siri ayu ca vanno ca bhogang buddhi ca yasava satavasa ca ayu ca jiva siddhi bhavantu te.